for now, I'm just trying to sort out all my papers here. We kind of interrupted right in the middle of a conversation last week. No, that's not the paper that I need. I've got notes here someplace, but I've put too much other stuff in my Bible along with them. Yes, here we go. All right. We were asking the question last week, does the 10th commandment forbid prosperity? That is to say, is it sinful for Christians or other people for that matter? Okay, let me pause right here and back up and talk about something. You're not going to know these names, but there has been a real brawl taking place this week within the evangelical world. And it's taking place, of all places, on Facebook. Yeah, that's never good, right? On the one side of this brawl, you have Robert A.J. Gagnon, who is, have you been following this at all?
A little bit.
He is probably the leading evangelical voice against transgenderism, same-sex marriage, who still makes a biblical case that homosexuality is immoral and indecent. On the other side of the brawl is Tremper Longman, who is he used to teach at Westminster Seminary, which is a very conservative seminary, but Tremper, 20 years ago now, started edging further and further to the left. Eventually he left Westminster and ended up out kind of on the evangelical left fringe. And he has been, of course, if you're going to make an issue out of things like same-sex marriage and transgenderism, you cannot possibly be a friend of the Democratic Party. Now, you can still have friends who are Democrats, and by the way, I hope you do, but you can't be a friend of the Democratic Party. And Gagnon doesn't pull any punches. He just flatly says the Democratic Party is demonic. He will admit the Republican Party is worldly, they're not Christian, they work against Christianity in lots of ways, but they're way better than the Democratic Party. Well, Tremper Longman has the view that even though homosexuality he thinks is wrong, even though abortion he thinks is wrong, those aren't the really big issues of the day. The big issues of the day for Tremper Longman are social justice issues like making sure the poor are getting enough money and that they have health care and that all immigrants are welcomed. He doesn't even like to draw a distinction between legal versus illegal immigrants. So he's way over on the left. And he's one of these evangelicals who not only voted for Biden, for Harris and Walz, but encouraged other evangelicals to vote for Harris and Walz. And one of the things, these two have been slapping each other around on Facebook. And I'm not recommending you go there. But one of the things that Longman and his friends keep saying is, you can't use legislation to make non-Christians act like Christians. Now, let me ask you a question. Is it just Christianity who thinks that transgenderism is weird?
No.
70% of the people do.
Right. Not performing surgery on children who wonder whether they're transgender, not giving them chemicals that block puberty and that kind of thing. That's not expecting people to act like Christians. That's just expecting people to exercise common sense. This isn't Christianity. This is just basic morality. And of course, Gagnon has got around to making that point as well. But this is part of why I asked the question and then revised it the way I do. Is it wrong for a Christian to become wealthy? And then I had to pause and think, no, is it wrong for anybody to become wealthy? And we're trying to answer that question. Or is it wrong for somebody to wish that they had more than they do? Is that greed if you wish that you have more than you do? Is that covetousness if you wish that you had more than you do? Is it covetousness to try to work to try to improve your lot in life? And last week we started looking through some passages in the book of Proverbs that sort of touch on this issue. And when we quit, we were in Proverbs chapter 14. Proverbs chapter 14. Honestly, this thing with Gagnon and Longman, I've never seen anything like this in my life. And these are both guys who would criticize fundamentalists for their behavior, but they're both acting like fundamentalists. Which leads me to observe, everybody is a fundamentalist about something. Okay, if you just hit the right buttons, everybody acts like a fundamentalist. Anyway, Proverbs chapter 14, verses 23 and 24. The crown of the wise is their riches, but the foolishness of fools is folly. Well, I should read 23. In all labor there is profit, but the talk of the lips tendeth only to penury. And then we talked about that last week, but then comes this verse. The crown of the wise is their riches, but the foolishness of fools is folly. So, in these verses, what is the book of Proverbs saying about wealth?
Nothing wrong with it.
Excuse me?
It's a good thing.
In what way is it a good thing? Clearly it's a good thing, but in what way?
If there's a crown on your head and you're called wise, then you have behaved well.
Exactly.
The association with wealth is a good thing.
In other words, if you have behaved wisely with respect to this worldly resources, then the wealth that you accumulate is your recognition and reward, your crown for doing that. So the person who behaves wisely can, as a general rule, expect to increase in wealth. What about the person who does not behave wisely? What's the label for a person who doesn't behave wisely? He is a fool. So what is the reward of fools? More folly. In other words, if you don't behave wisely, if you behave foolishly, you're just going to keep losing stuff. You're going to get further and further behind. I remember, 2007, that the economy went south so badly, 2007, 2008, somewhere in that time frame. I can remember driving across northern Wisconsin on Highway 70 and on Highway 77. And as we would go past homes along the way, here, home after home after home had snowmobiles, had boats sitting out in the yard with for sale signs on them. Was it that way around here too? Everybody was selling everything. Why? In most cases, it was because they couldn't keep up the payments. In other words, these were people who had stretched their credit to the limits. They were living on borrowed money. And it's no wonder that when the economy hiccuped, and it was a big hiccup, but it was only a hiccup, You know, it wasn't a disaster, but when the economy hiccuped, they couldn't do anything about it. Jerry?
Well, at that time, you could borrow money by just telling them you wanted to borrow money. In fact, you could get more money to build a home than the home you were after it was built.
There were all kinds of things wrong with the system at that point. The system was built around folly, and people bought into the folly of the system. And those of us who just remembered the book of Proverbs, that the borrower is a slave to the lender, I mean, that's a simple principle that keeps you out of so much trouble. And by the way, this verse is the whole problem with what I'm going to call make work and welfare programs, with redistribution. We're going to take money away from people who have it. We're going to find ways to get that money into the hands of people who don't have it. Sometimes people who don't have money lack money because of unfortunate circumstances. Many times people who lack money lack it because they have been foolish with what they have. And if you give them more money, they will simply continue to be foolish. They haven't learned their lesson. And that's exactly what this verse is teaching. Highly relevant, I think, to this question. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 22.
Can I make a comment here?
Please do.
If you look at Proverbs 12:24, it gives you kind of a good idea too. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. I mean, that kind of works into it.
It kind of works into this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You work hard, you tend to get ahead. You don't work hard, you know, what is, oh, there are so many proverbs about the slothful. You know, the sluggard will not plow by reason of the rain. Which, this, you know, in the Middle East, really, it's going to rain? Or, you know, the sluggard says he won't go out because he says there's a lion in the streets. I suppose that was a remote possibility, but it's really remote. Yeah. Chapter 22, verse 4. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. What do you make of that? Okay, let's start here. Is that saying that if you fear the Lord, you are going to be rich?
No.
Not necessarily. That's the mistake of the prosperity gospel people. They try to take a generalization and turn it into a hard, fast rule. Okay, they overlook two factors. One is that God, in his providence, may sometimes withhold wealth from us for specific reasons. God is doing things with us that require poverty. Second is they overlook the fact that with the entrance of sin into the world, there is an element of chaos out there. And no matter how good you are, you may trip over just plain bad circumstances. That too is providential. But generally, well, go ahead, Martha.
Well, I was just wondering, where it says riches, does that always mean monetarily?
I think in this book it tends to. In the book of Proverbs, it tends to. I think there's a general principle here that the kind of person who is humble and the kind of person who fears the Lord is the kind of person who tends to accumulate wealth, to accumulate honor, and to have a longer life. In fact, one of the pioneers of a discipline that's called sociology of religion was a German by the name of Max Weber. Max Weber wrote a book entitled The Protestant Ethic and the spirit of capitalism. And what he argues in that book is that the reason that Europe became wealthy is because Protestants, and he is not a Protestant, he is and was an atheist, but Protestants believed in working hard, in treating people fairly, and in saving. And you know what? If you do those things, if you work hard, if you treat people fairly, if you save rather than spending everything you've got, there is a tendency for wealth to accumulate. Now that's, bear in mind, the book of Proverbs is giving us general principles. It's not giving us hard and fast rules that apply to every single circumstance. But the general rule is, if you're the kind of person who stays humble and fears the Lord, that means you're going to work hard. That means you're not going to be spending your money on frivolous things. That means you're going to be treating people honestly. So wealth is going to accumulate. And by the way, you'll probably live longer because you're not going out and getting plastered all the time. You will probably have more honor in your community. Look down, same chapter, verses 33 and 34. No, that can't be right. Oh, chapter 24, verses 33 and 34. In fact, let's go back to verse 30. I went by the field of the slothful, and by the vineyard of the man void of understanding. And lo, it was all grown over with thorns, and nettles had covered the face thereof, and the stone wall thereof was broken down. Then I saw and considered it well. I looked upon it and received instruction. Now he's going to be quoting the sluggard here. Yet a little sleep, a little slumber. Hit the snooze alarm, get 5 minutes more. A little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth. As one that traveleth. And thy want as an armed man. Okay, so what lesson are we going to draw from these verses? Are you feeling like, why do I have to say this? It's just obvious.
Well, you know, what comes to mind, we used to, when we were living in Colorado, Martha and I, we had a neighbor that, he pretty much resembled 30 and 31. I mean, he didn't take care of his property at all. He, you know, the ground was all covered with thorns and stuff, but he was always, it seemed like he was always driving a new pickup or, you know, had something fancy to, you know, whether he paid for it or not, I don't know, because I ain't involved with it. But just to look at him on the surface, you know, you would say, well, this guy, he must be doing really well because he dresses nice and he's got a really nice pickup, but when you drove by his property, everything was nasty. Mm-hmm. So, you know, he was playing two cards there, really.
Comment?
Just, if my focus is on ease and extra sleep, I love the word picture in verse 34. It's like, my poverty is going to be like a robber that's going to hold me up at gunpoint,
yep.
Basically. And I think that stands in contrast to the verses that talk about our focus being on wisdom and on the fear of the Lord.
So my first senior pastorate was in Newton, Iowa. Started in the middle of the summer in 1985 and left at the end of 1990, so just shy of 6 years there. And it was in some ways a very good ministry. I'm remembering one young had taken a job at a local grocery store and was applying for a management track position. And his boss called him in. Now, bear in mind, this is a small town. This is about 18,000 people at the time. So not a huge city. But it was the world headquarters of Maytag Corporation. Maytag had two big plants in town, which, interestingly enough, were named Plant 1 and Plant 2. His boss called him in. He said, "You've applied for this job." He said, "Yes, sir." He said, tell me what you think of your qualifications." And the young man told him and explained how he was willing to work hard. And at that point, the boss says, "Well," he says, "I'll tell you what, I drove past your house. You've kept up your home pretty well. Your lawn was mowed neatly. Your yard was manicured. Your car was washed and in good condition." He said, "You're the kind of person we want in our management track." Never occurred to me that a boss might go do that. But this guy had. He wanted to see how the young man lived. And his picture of what the young man did at home gave him an impression of what the young man was going to do on the job. And he got the job. So damn no act. Yeah. So, okay, let's do one more here. Actually, two more maybe. Chapter 30. Beginning in verse 7. "Two things have I required of thee." He's talking to God here. "Two things have I required of thee. Deny me them not before I die." Here's the first one. "Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me." So, I don't want to be rich. I don't want to be poor. What happens if I get rich? "Well, lest I be full and deny thee and say, Who is the Lord?" What happens if I'm too poor? "Or lest I be poor and steal and take the name of my God in vain." So, it's not wrong to be wealthy, but we need, and by the way, it's not wrong to be poor. Neither of those is sinful, but both of them come with risks. The risk of wealth is that, well, Paul talks about this in the New Testament. It's a common tendency for rich people to become very full of themselves and to think that they don't need God because they've got money. Why do you need God if you've got money? On the other hand, the writer of this proverb reminds us that if you're poor, the trap there is to steal, to get what you need, and to take the name of God in vain, whether by what you do or by what you say. You look at Job. Job went through some moments of real poverty like that. And the shining thing about Job's example, he made his share of mistakes in that episode, but the shining thing about his example is that he never took the Lord's name in vain. In fact, you remember when God confronted Job's friends, you remember what he said to them? He said, "Job has spoken the truth about me, and you haven't." And it's worth remembering that. Even when Job is mistaken, he's still somehow speaking the truth about God, not taking God's name in vain. Now, there's one more that I just want to look at here, and that's in the next chapter. Let's just start in verse 10. "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She is like the merchant's ships, and bringeth her food from afar. She goes on long shopping trips, that's what that means. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat, food to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She's a pretty shrewd business person. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. Don't ever think that it's wrong for women to have careers. This Proverbs 31 woman certainly does. In the New Testament, Lydia certainly did. She girdeth her loins with strength, and strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good. Her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands hold the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she reacheth forth her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. She maketh fine linen, and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. Now I'm going to stop right there. We're far enough in here to see that this is a woman who works hard. She is smart. She not only works hard, she invests, and she invests wisely. And the Lord blesses and honors her efforts to the point that if she had to, she could support the household on her own. Now, it's not taking anything away from her husband. It is just to say that principles of wisdom, principles of hard work, principles of thrift and industry, these apply to women as well as to men. I'm going to leave that right there for now. And now we're going to do something a little bit different. In a few moments, I'm going to ask you to divide into